And hello again, everybody. Scott Rossman, Sports Director for WJHG News Channel 7, along with anchor reporter Hayden Smith. And our next 7-plus sports talk centers around Hayden, the so-called Teddy Bridgewater Act, and how it may be affecting the future of high school football in our area, in our region, across the state of Florida. If you're not familiar with the Teddy Bridgewater is, and you know what his career arc was, and why this act is named after him, let's go ahead and inform you on that. Teddy Bridgewater was a young man who grew up in Miami, went to Northwestern High School in the heart of Miami, was a football player there, and unfortunately, the Gators did not want to allow him to be a quarterback, so he went up to Louisville, and where he was promised to be a quarterback, and he was a darn good college quarterback, and then spent 11 years in the National Football League, earning some $60 million plus over his career, and then came back to his alma mater, inner city school, Miami Northwestern, in the heart of the city, and was the head coach there, and within a couple of seasons led his team to a 3A state championship. Later got suspended because he was found to have given impermissible benefits to his players. He was providing them Uber rides, he was providing them meals, clothing, and some other things. There were allegations that he had provided them with limousines and had taken them to steakhouses and all that, and those allegations more or less disappeared. But at any rate, he was spending his own money, of which he had a lot of it, or has a lot of it, and I'm sure other coaches in the area, especially now that players can transfer willy-nilly, walk across the street, so to speak, and go from one school to another, and a lot of folks didn't like what was happening.
Yeah, exactly, and all of that kind of coalesces into the Teddy Bridgewater Act that gets passed in mid-February and was unanimously passed, which authorizes K through 12 head coaches to use $15,000 in personal funds per year to support student-athlete welfare. And Scott, again, we'll talk about this throughout the podcast. This has a lot of great upside to it, but also some scary implications that could kind of domino effect.
Well, the big question is, are we once again widening the opening of Pandora's box? There's NIL in college, which we've seen, and again, the transfer rule on the high school level, student athletes transferring between football and then baseball season from one school to another, attending two schools at one time. How does a kid even earn a diploma doing that? But now coaches are faced with the option of, hey, spending $15,000 of my own money. That's a great thing for all of us. And maybe not. Does it create an unfair situation where a coach in a more affluent section now has easier access to funds? And they're supposed to report it. There's got to be paperwork involved, which, let's face it, high school football coaches love paperwork, don't we all? And like if you buy a kid, say you give a kid a ride home, and on the way home you buy him a pizza or a cheeseburger and all that, well, there's some paperwork. And if you don't do the paperwork, there still will be, could be some sanctions involved. Or if the paperwork isn't done and nobody's there to police it, how do we know that the coach is spending, $1,000, $5,000, $15,000, or $25,000? And then, like you and I were talking before we started taping this, you were talking about what about assistant coaches and bringing on affluent people who maybe just are added to the staff, but now they're assistant coaches.
Yeah, there's a lot of different kind of loopholes in this law that was passed in February. Like you said, Scott, you could bring on an assistant coach who's not really there as a coach. She's more or less there to bankroll the team, bankroll the program. There's a lot of great things about this, but at the same time, certain coaches might be abusing the system here, especially if you are a wealthy head coach.
And let's let that lead us into some of the sound from some coaches. I sat down via Zoom with 5 area coaches, one of them who's just jumping back into the head coaching ranks after being an administrator in Gulf County. But we'll start with a few of the coaches. Basically, I threw it out there, hey, what do you know about this, and what is your first impression of this so-called Teddy Bridgewater Act?
Obviously, the intention is not for coaches to pay players as much as it is to make sure the players are taken care of in terms of the things that they need to be, the things that they need to be successful. And I think it's more along the lines of the things that the coaches, the school, whoever, the district, however you want to put it, that we provide kids every day because their home situations don't allow them to get that type of support. You know what I mean? I think it's you're looking at it from the standpoint of we can provide kids transportation to school to come take a standardized test for graduation, but we can't provide them transportation to come to school because we want them to be in first period weightlifting class on time. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, both of those things go hand in hand because we know as coaches, if we get them to school and we get them into weightlifting, they're going to be in the rest of their classes. They're going to be there the rest of the day. You know what I mean? So I think it's just, I know the intention is to, is to be able to just, provide the kids things that maybe their families can't, that their home situation doesn't allow them to provide. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I just think anytime that you have an opportunity as a coach to be able to help kids, especially kids that are in need, for since the beginning of time, coaches, have been providing transportation for players. They've been, going out of their way to help a kid with a meal here or there. So, I mean, to me, these things have been going on for a long time. And now to me, it's just policy that has evolved with the reality of the things that are going on in the coaching world. And coaches now can do these things with a clear conscience and not have to worry about, any type of negative repercussions that may go along. I'd say, some version of this has been going on for a long time. And now the rule is just matching the reality of the situation, coaches being able to help kids, especially kids that are in need.
Nothing's going to be perfect. There's going to be challenges with everything. And I think, there's always going to be haves and have nots. And I think in this situation, if you're a coach that, has a lot of expendable income, that's going to create a little bit of an advantageous situation for you to be able to do that. Not all coaches are going to be able to spend, $15,000 or so on helping their kids. So, nothing's going to be perfect. I didn't agree with the severity of what went on with Teddy Bridgewater. And I think this law has some merits. Is it perfect? I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's ever going to be a perfect one, but it does allow for guys, and I don't think there's probably any coach out there that hasn't bought a kid a meal when he was hungry or hasn't done something like that. That would have technically been a violation. So, I understand, the merits behind the law. How it's going to look in this application, I'm not sure. It's again, there are going to be folks that are going to have that ability and folks that don't. And whether or not that's going to create a little bit of an unfair advantage for some folks, who's to say? But again, it does not make sense for coaches whose heart's in the right place to be punished severely for things when they were really just trying to help kids. So I don't know that there's a perfect solution to it, but it does give coaches some protection if they do find themselves in those situations.
And that was a general consensus, obviously, of the three of them and the two others that we're going to hear from in a minute. No doubt about it. They don't want coaches being punished for doing the right thing, for helping the kids. And I don't think there's anybody out there that says, hey, a kid needs a pair of jeans, let's say. He's in a home situation where, he doesn't have the clothing that's necessary to come to school and feel like, have some self-esteem by what he's wearing. That, no doubt about it, coaches do that all the time, as these three head coaches just talked about. And it's, as Coach Whitten said, it's been going on since the start of high school football way back in the day. And coaches have been assisting their student athletes in a variety. And teachers do it too. Teachers, and that was a good point, one of them pointing out there, you can get, Coach Brown, saying that you can help a kid get there for a standardized test, but you can't make sure that he's there for, or has a ride home from practice, or has a ride to make sure that he gets there for a first period weightlifting class. Again, but there is the flip side to all this. Is that not how you feel, Hayden?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I definitely think that there are some great positives to this, and obviously a lot of different negatives that can be taken advantage of. My thought process is that you take this to a smaller school in a rural area. I'm just kind of thinking about back home for me in a very small Southern Indiana school of just less than 300 kids. That's huge to be able to just come back from a game and the coach is able to get everybody something to eat afterwards, and is able to buy that for the entire team, to be able to just help everybody out, especially like you said earlier, just kind of some of the kids that might not have a great situation at home. It benefits them to be able to have a hot meal after a game, before a game, whatever that might be, before the state tournament, whatever it's going to be able to kind of have that advantage.
But, and then there's, the pessimist in me, some worries about what about the school with 300 students that's 2 towns down the road in rural southern Indiana, let's say, and the local car dealer or the guy who owns the big, corn farm there, and he's a prominent, booster of South Bloomington High School or whatever the case might be, and now he's funneling $15,000 a year to that coach, and the kids get aware of it. Well, does it put an undue stress on the coach in that first school you're talking about? Now I have to spend $15,000, but I don't have, the big farmer or the car dealer or whatever. And
Trying to compete with different schools, you're trying to compete with the wallets of the other head coach instead of enrollment of the other school.
and as you indicated before, and perhaps the wallets of an assistant coach who's hired, who's got a whole heck of a lot of money. And that let's continue hearing from the coaches, including two new coaches into the mix, talking about, again, this Teddy Bridgewater Act, a coach perhaps coming out of his own pocket to the tune of $15,000. And what are some of the possible downsides, and can they see that coming?
Well, that's a concern across the board, but over the years, there's no telling how much, that all of us as coaches have helped our kids and have done for our kids. I mean, I've paid light bills and, trying to help parents whose electricity got turned off, and, kids within that were already on our team who couldn't get dressed in the morning because they didn't have any electricity. I mean, those things have been happening for years. I think the coaches that have good intentions will continue to have good intentions. I think the coaches that maybe have ulterior motives to this, it just kind of opens the door for them, to maybe gain some advantages. But, at the end of the day, we do what we think is best for our kids and our community. And though the majority, I still believe the majority of coaches do it for the right reasons. But yeah, I mean, the problem is going to be, there's going to really be no way to have any checks and balances over that, and where the money's coming from and how much money is actually being spent. Then you add on top of that, the boosters now being able to pay coaches salaries through the school system. Where does that go? Those are just things that, they're really things that you almost can't worry about because you don't have a lot of control over them. You just have to go coach and try to do the best job you can with your program and your kids, and hope that doing the right thing and treating kids right and is enough for people.
I think it opens up a couple of areas where I could see it being abused. And I mean, at the same time, from my understanding with it, is if you do spend your own finances, you also have to report it, say immediately, to the FHSAA. So I mean, it leaves an area where, if that's not done, a coach opens themselves up to getting in trouble. I mean, I'm like many other coaches, we've probably all done it at some point. We stop on the way home and kid doesn't have money, you pick up his meal, but I mean, I don't know. I just think, when you sit here and actually make legislation for it, you open it up for people to abuse it.
I guess there's always that, that the probability that could happen. But, again, like Coach Whidden said, with the paperwork and everything, it's not just, you don't just have $15,000 willy-nilly that you can go spend. You know what I mean? You got to be able to justify it and document it. And I don't know, I'd be willing to, I'm hard pressed to find any coaches that were, willing to give all that to one or two kids. Then you're right back to where you started. You're right back to, you can't provide the stuff that, that the kids really, the kids really need. I mean, it's not an NIL, it's not an NIL budget. It's it's the incidentals. You know what I mean? It's when it's when after a game and a kid's sitting out there outside of the gym for an hour and you realize he doesn't have a ride and you take him home and be able to ask that kid, hey man, you want to swing through McDonald's, you can get him a bite to eat because you don't want to send him home at night hungry after a 3-hour football game. You know what I mean? I think it's those kind of, situations that this is what it's for. I don't know that, I don't know of very many coaches that are going to try to use this as a way to we fought so hard to be able to get this to make it so, like Coach said, we don't have to, quote unquote, look over our shoulder every time we need to help a kid out with something that we know the kid needs. You know what I mean? We don't want to get back to the situation where they take it away. So I'm pretty confident that most coaches are going to use it for what it's for.
Like in anything, like when it comes to rule, there are going to be coaches out there that are trying to flirt in the gray and trying to manipulate the rules to their benefit. Yeah, that's always going to be the case. But I'm of the nature and the belief that, like, if that is what your goal is in all of this, then you're going to have a lot more problems in the long run because of that. Because again, it's going to lead to jealousy. It's going to lead to this. Like, no, the intent of the rule is being able to help kids and provide for kids that may be less fortunate. And when you get outside of those parameters, to me, it's just going to create a lot more problems for you as the head coach, and then a lot more, problems for those kids that you're bending the rules for. And our program, like, I want kids to be a part of our program because they see the value in which Mosley football provides for them, not only while their time at Mosley, but their time after Mosley football. And again, I get back to your question. Do I think people will try to do that? Yeah, like anything else, people are always trying to do that, but we will definitely not be doing that at Mosley High School.
I mean, look, they currently don't have the manpower. If there's an allegation submitted, schools have to investigate it themselves because they don't have the manpower to do that. Because, I mean, let's be real. There's plenty of sleazy people, in the world and even in this profession that, there's not enough manpower to police all of it. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, when you look at it, giving kid a $200 gas card. I mean, that's, yeah. Hey, you don't have to live in our district. You got a car. Here's gas every month to be able to make it back and forth from somewhere else. I mean, how does that not line up with recruiting?
You take a guy like Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, his resources are going to be a little different than the average football coach. I mean, he's an ex-NFL player. He's made quite a bit of money throughout his career, and so he's going to have those resources. That are not going to be a big deal to him. And whether or not this becomes a recruiting tool, just to say it, whether or not guys are going to be able to provide these resources where other guys can't, that's a possibility. Again, there's no perfect solution to any of this stuff. I don't think the coaches who are genuinely trying to help players, should be punished severely for that. But at the same time, is it going to give some guys that have bigger resources an advantage, or bigger booster clubs, folks with more money in their programs? Is it going to give them an unfair advantage when it comes to, encouraging kids to want to come, play for the school and provide them the resources in order to do that? So, who's to say how it's all going to shake out? $15,000 doesn't sound like a great deal of money, but at the same time, it's pretty significant, in terms of what it could do for whether or not you're doing it for a number of kids or just a couple of kids. So I think that's also, it didn't say what you could expend on an individual kid. And I think maybe that was something that maybe should have been addressed, or at least illuminated to some degree. But how it ends up on the back end, it's always one of those wait and see things. But I do think it provides a little protection to coaches that are genuinely trying to do some things, to help kids.
To answer your question, there's no way to manage that. I mean, if it really starts to grow legs and people start taking advantage of it, the schools that have a lot and the coaches that have a lot are going to gain distinct advantage. But just, give me a group of kids that just want to play football and let's go do that. And, I'll let all the rest of it take care of itself.
Give me a group of kids that just want to play football. It seems like that train is leaving the station anymore. Give me a group of kids that want to play football in the area where they grew up and play for the school that's just down the street or in their neighborhood or even just one neighborhood over. But Man, we're headed down a rabbit hole, so to speak. I know that's become a bit of a cliche recently, but it's inevitable. Like these coaches have indicated that you've now legislated it. You can give money away, and you were reading a Sports Illustrated article that kind of attacked this issue. Talk a little bit about that, Hayden.
Yeah, again, I mean, there's just so many different goods and bads about this, Scott, pros and cons.
Adding a wealthy booster to the coaching staff, giving him a nominal title, and then using his personal funds to finance the team. And again, these coaches, a lot of them were unsure as to, is it $15,000 per coach? Is it $15,000 per program? Does the money have to come from the coach? Can somebody give the coach $15,000 as a direct donation to the booster club? And then the coach disperses that money. And there are still a lot of questions to be asked. And again, as many of these coaches indicated, the FHSAA, which kind of polices these kind of laws and rules, this is, a state law now, but the FHSAA is left to try and police it. But as Coach Teza said, they don't have, anytime an allegation's made, well, the school has to investigate itself. So now we're basically on the honor system, and we all know how sometimes the honor system can be abused.
Yeah, Scott, that's what kind of concerns me, is the fact that the FHSA and Florida high school football, just putting that as an example, is already stretched so thin that this is impossible almost to be able to police. Again, like you said, you're focusing in on the honor system, if that even exists anymore, across the board. I find that hard to believe that a lot of some of these head coaches that maybe want to abuse the system, and that's kind of what they're in this for, to try and just get those wins and get those championships. It's going to be harder to crack down on that.
I think about a guy like Michael Irvin, who no doubt about it is going to have the purest of intentions in terms of going back. He grew up in Miami, in the city of Miami, and played ball there, and he's going to want to go back. I can't remember off the top of my head his alma mater, but he's got $15,000 extra to spend on the young men who may not even be zoned for his school, but you better believe a guy like Michael Irvin or other, a lot of NFL alums. And again, them pumping money back into their respective alma maters, that's a good thing. Buy helmets, buy shoulder pads, buy sleds, buy footballs, do all of that.
But don't use it as a recruiting tool.
Well, yes, don't use it as a recruiting tool. But again, does a school with a very prominent NFL alum who's now coaching it, he can buy, a $800,000 air-conditioned, motor coach, a bus kind of to take his kids from spot to spot. And the kids, social media and all that, and then that bus takes them to the local steakhouse on a Friday night when they win, and that gets around, and it's just, boy, again, Pandora's box, it's already blown wide open, but this is just, I fear, some coaches, again, the vast majority of the coaches in our region I have great respect for, and they do an amazing job, the men and the women in all the sports. And the student athlete is almost always their primary concern, and they're trying to better these kids' lives, both academically and athletically, and see them succeed in life. But you always get a few bad apples, and once that happens, boy, it's like you said, it's going to be a bad recruiting advantage, or a huge recruiting advantage, and a bad thing overall for high school football.
Yeah, exactly, Scott. But going back to everything, I think it's, in theory, a phenomenal tool for especially coaches around our area to be able to utilize. And like you've heard this entire podcast from all these different head coaches that we were able to talk to, they definitely are in it, like you said, for the student athletes. They want to better their lives, both on the field and off the field. And I think it's just a phenomenal tool for these head coaches to be able to utilize.
Yeah, at least now they don't have to worry about getting in trouble for buying a pizza on the way home when a young man needs a ride home, and you realize the kid hasn't eaten. So
Exactly.
that's a good thing. So, well, hopefully we've shed a little light on this this big change within high school football in our locale, and the men who coach on the high school level, and their dedication and their service to thousands of young men over the years is fantastic, and we appreciate them. We appreciate them for taking the time to talk to us about this, and that's going to do it for this edition of 7 Plus Sports Talk, brought to us by Bill Bird Kia. We thank our sponsor for Hayden. I'm Scott. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you later.